It might just be me, but I've been observing lately a phenomenon. Actually, I say lately, for the past 20 years of my life, I've been observing a phenomenon that I'll call, I guess, a demigame. And this isn't a real term, this is something I'm making up, but I'm going to define it in this video. A demigame, essentially, is when you fall in love with a game so much that you're just in love with the idea that the game exists. And for you, that's enough to call yourself or to consider yourself a player of the game. Allow me to explain. Like all humans, tabletop gamers sometimes make irrational choices. We do it in our games, but we also do it when choosing what game to play. Choosing to play a tabletop RPG or war game just because you like the look of the rulebook is literally judging a book by its cover, and seems like a recipe for disaster, but somehow it does sometimes work. I'm not here to recommend it, I'm only here to defend it. In the realm of immersive games, one of the roles of game rules is to provide structure for your desire to be immersed in the game world. Of course, game rules have another important function. Yes, they do. They create the game that you play. But honestly, you get to balance the importance of those two roles for yourself. You might decide that the game mechanics are really, really important to you because after all, that's the reason the thing is a game and not just like an art book. But you're free to decide instead that all you really want is an excuse to participate in a series of thought exercises in a fictional setting that you enjoy. Sometimes that's the value of a book or board game or card game or whatever that's particularly bad at being a game, but that's really good at, well, looking good. Once you've been a gamer long enough, you know the games I mean. You might have your own examples, but for me, I guess Shadowrun kind of comes to mind. There are easier ways to play a cyberpunk RPG than to resort to Shadowrun, and yet I keep going back to Shadowrun because I enjoy Shadowrun. I'm not looking for a cyberpunk science fantasy RPG that looks and feels like the Sixth World. I'm looking for exactly what I get from Shadowrun books. I want the weird layout, the in-universe narration, the fictional Usenet posts formatted for some reason as a bullet list, I guess because the layout artist didn't know any other way to highlight a text block. Overcomplex weapon rules, overcomplex magic rules, overcomplex pretty much everything. I want to be abused by Shadowrun because, for whatever reason, that's become part of my Sixth World experience. Not enough to switch to 6th edition. Admittedly, we all have our limits. It probably seems like I'm just saying that sometimes style overtakes content, and some people are happy to relax with a stylistic book and call it a game. There's more to it than that, though. Planescape back in the 90s was just as playable as D&D itself, and yet the main appeal of it for me and my friends was the conceit of the setting. Admittedly, the art did a lot of heavy lifting to express that setting, and that was definitely influential, but I don't think there's a reasonable argument that Planescape wasn't a well-designed game. It was AD&D and was, at least insofar as AD&D was, beyond reproach. And that is just as far as AD&D was. There's things to reproach AD&D about, but it was playable for everything else out there. Planescape was as playable as AD&D, but Planescape had such a powerful identity that it transcended the D&D brand for me and my friends. We knew it was D&D, I guess, but we also sort of forgot it was D&D. It was Planescape first, and it got mixed up in a meta fantasy world of the Dark Crystal and ElfQuest and Labyrinth. We didn't create characters to play Planescape. Playing Planescape for us was more about flipping through the books and following through on conversations inspired by the different philosophies of all the different factions within Sigil and the Planes. What's the inverse of playing a game only because you enjoy the idea of the game? Well, interestingly, I don't think an inverse exists. I think the inverse is null. When you don't have a rule book or source book for a game world, then you have no excuse to sit around your house doing absolutely nothing but pondering that game world, or at least that's how it is for me. Were I to set aside an hour to ponder the Sixth World or Sigil or the Fallout Wasteland or Bureau 13, my mind would wander off into any number of tangents, or else I'd realize I was wasting my time and I'd go do something quote unquote productive. A game, whether the mechanics are good enough to play or not, can serve as a focal point for feeling like you're playing the game. You want to pretend like you're playing. There are several levels of abstraction available. Exhibit A, you can think about playing the game. Exhibit B, you can think about the game with no intention of playing it. Exhibit C, you can think about the game world. Exhibit D, you can just enjoy the game assets for what they are, admiring the way the ideas are presented. Exhibit E, you can enjoy the game assets for the ideas they inspire. Exhibit F, you can actually play the game. Exhibit G, you can play a modified version of the game so that it's actually fun or whatever, and so on. Gaming is weird. Sometimes the presentation of a game just happens to appeal to you, and so you decide it's an enjoyable game. It may or may not be a game you would recommend, but you enjoy the conceit of the game. Is it really a game if you don't play it as intended? Or when you play, you have to ignore half the rules because they're broken? Or if you just don't play it at all? Well, yes. Yes, it is.